writing function rules. And this time, though, we're going to write function rules when we're starting with a graph. Last time they told us exactly what the slope was, exactly what the y-intercept was, and we were able to write our function rule. This time we'll have to do a little bit of investigating from the graph to determine, once again, the slope and the y-intercept. Those are the only two things that you need to write a function rule. You need to know the slope. You need to know the y-intercept. I left the equation up there because it's the same. The y and the x, they're going to stay put. That's why I have them checked. They don't move. And it's the m and the b that we have to find. If you remember, m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. So if I have a graph and I want to know the y-intercept, I got to go to the y-axis and check to see where does my graph cross the x-axis. So if I'm looking at the blue line, I can see that the blue line is crossing this heavy black point. Sorry that it doesn't exactly. Writing straight lines with these tablets isn't the easiest thing to do. Um, but the blue line is supposed to be crossing this heavy black point, and it's doing so at 0, 2. So my y-intercept is at a positive 2. I've got half of my function rule already filled in. To get the other half of the function rule, that's the number that's in front of x. That's my slope. To calculate slope on a graph, we can count rise and run. If you forgot how to do that, you can go back and watch the video calculating slope given a graph. But we're going to review it right here too, so that's going to help. So if I want to calculate my slope, I want to be able to go from the first heavy black point to the second heavy black point. In order to do that, my rise would actually be a drop, so I'm going down 2. So negative 2. And I got to go to the right, so that's positive. And I got to go to the right 3 units. I'm counting these heavy black squares. 1, 2, 3. And then here it was only 1, 2 in my triangle. So my slope is negative 2/3. So in my m, in front of my x, I'm going to put the fraction negative 2/3. Now I didn't leave quite enough space for that negative 2/3. You have to be careful when you're writing a fraction in front of x. You don't want it to look like the x is in the denominator. Okay, that means something different. What you want it to look like is that either x is on the top, which is fine, but sometimes it's harder for us to determine our slope that way, or x is right even with the fraction bar, kind of right dead center. So I tried to do that by moving my negative 2/3 a little bit above and below that black line that I drew. So just be careful when you're writing a fraction in front of a variable. One of the best things to do is to put parentheses around it, especially when you're writing it. As far as Moodle is concerned, you probably are going to want to put it in as a decimal. I am a fan of fractions, but Moodle doesn't handle fractions very well. So if I were to put this into Moodle, I would have to write, sorry, this problem ended up being all over the place. I would have to write y equals negative 0.66x plus 2, because 2/3 as a fraction is 6 repeating. And I set up Moodle to have at least 2 decimal places, so I could type it in as 0.66x with a negative sign in front. Some of those will be multiple choice, so you will choose the correct multiple choice that helps fit your problem. Excuse me. Okay, I have another graph, purple graph, and basically we're going to do the same thing. We already know that this purple line is crossing the y-axis at -1. So over here, I don't know how well this is going to show up. Over here I have a -1, -1, because that's where my y-intercept is. The only blank I have to fill in yet is this blank right here in front of the x. What is my slope for this line? Well, again, I have to count the rise and the run. Because rise goes on top, I always seem to count that first. Whoops. So I count 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 green squares. So my rise is going to be 3. And my run is 1. And by the way, I dropped. So I have to make sure I put it as a -3. I almost made some of the same mistakes that my students make. So my rise, it went down. So -3, I can tell the graph is going down as well. My run, I only had to go 1 unit to the right. Negative 3 over 1 is the same thing as just writing negative 3. So my slope is negative 3, and my rule then would be negative 3x minus 1.